All right, welcome everyone to our Keiretsu Academy for the month of July. We are excited today to have Anne-Marie Archer back with us. Anne-Marie came out last August and spoke at our Angel Capital Expo about character. And it was so well received by our community that we wanted to bring her back in for a little bit longer discussion on kind of the key elements of what we're looking at with team. I've lost most of my money due to team over my years of investing, and making sure that the team component is actually what you need when you're writing checks. So she's going to be talking about kind of the switch that happens with individuals when they move from co-founder to CEO, and the key character elements that go into that when we're assessing these deals. So at that, I will turn it over to Anne-Marie to take us away, and we're excited to learn. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. So, hi everybody. Thanks for having me back. This is one of my favorite topics. Parts of it isn't, but the overall theme of it is really around character. So the intention, and we'll go, let's make this really, since we're a smaller group, let's make this like informal. If you have any questions as we're going through, or anything pops up, anything you want to know, anything doesn't sit right, just, say it. And then we'll stop and we'll go from there. We have more material here than we actually need for what we're going to talk about. So you might see me sort of skip along. And there'll be a lot of slides with lots of words on it, which I don't normally do, but we did for this because there was just some key pieces I wanted to make sure in here. So forgive us for lots of words, and if you want me to go back and flip back to a slide if you missed something, let me know. So the whole purpose of this is really to talk about the distinction of moving from co-founder, entrepreneur, person who has a dream and wants to go follow a dream and create something they see a need in the world, and then to mature CEO, mature company, mature organization. And I'm sure a lot of you in the room have been entrepreneurs and or been mature company people. So you know that it takes different skill sets to do those two things. And it's possible to build those, and sometimes it isn't. And so what we'll go through is there's really three parts to this, and what it is that I've done today is just a little different. I've put really three separate individual speeches sort of together. And so it'll look wonky, and just go with that with me if you would. But here's why. I wanted to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, which we all have actually, so just know it. I was just before I got here, I was coaching an entrepreneur who's had a successful company before and is now deciding to do another one, and he's right in that really hard spot where he's put himself in the context of, I've got to have X amount of dollars by, first round is done by end of September, and I had him on the phone today and he goes, how do I know that I can really do this? Like, and all of that came back up, and I'm sending him the deck today. So, but we talked about, you put yourself in the context called probably one of the hardest things in the world is to go ask for money for your dream. That's one of the hardest things to do. And he put himself in that context, and he's feeling the heat, and he's done it before. So I just reminded him, you've done it before, you have the method, you know how to do it, you will do this thing. So just know that, the imposter syndrome, I put this in here because we all have it at some point, no matter what you're doing. So that's why I did that. And then the founder syndrome piece really is key to pay attention to for when organizations aren't going the way you want them to go. And if you're looking to invest in them, you want to pay attention to some of these key things that show up. When a founder is running an organization, it's become more ego-driven versus actually what's the best thing for the company. And there are some certain key things you can look for and notice them, and then they'll keep repeating. So if I can bring at least that to your attention, you'll start to be able to sort of go, aha, if you see that happening. And then we'll talk about, the third piece is really to talk about character, because character is actually the determining factor that makes a difference inside of organizations. You can have the greatest technology, you can have the greatest operation piece, you can have the greatest everything, but if your leaders don't have character and actually know how to maximize those people, everything inside your organization, you're missing out on revenue. So it actually hits your bottom line by, we've now proven 5 times over. So, and there are certain pieces and ways of being inside a character that actually we can talk about that make a difference. So if this helps you choose companies better, that's the goal, right? And to be able to help develop them as you go along, okay? I've been doing this for, I was just telling Shannon here, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. It makes me really old, but let's just say 25, I'll feel better. But, right? But I've been doing this a long time, came through technology, so I have a technology background. I'm not an engineer, but I've hung out with, for most of my careers with technology, and then worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups. I've done search, so I've worked with lots of really large organizations. So we work with Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all of the large ones. We also work with a lot of startups and a lot of smaller organizations, and I'm brought in to coach often leaders, CEOs, people that are starting these things up. So they have the breadth of all of it, so I'm able to kind of know where they're heading, but also I'm really aware of what that day-to-day experience is. And I run my own business, so I have feet on the street, so I kind of know how that goes. So that's a little bit of brief background on me. I like your clicker, this is cool. Okay. So imposter syndrome, if you remember fear, then you've got it. Like, it really is the basis of fear. It's the core of yourself having a conversation with yourself about what could possibly go wrong. Here's the cool thing about this. The purpose of this is to really let you know you're not alone in this. Everyone has this at some point. Okay? And it's actually false. That's the F. Evidence appearing real. So if all you remember is fear, and when you're in fear, you just remember that it's false evidence appearing real. So that entrepreneur I was just working with this morning, he's done it before. He's raised a whole lot of money before and has had a successful business. He's had an illustrious career. It's amazing. He's still having those same thoughts. And all they are thoughts, and they're all coming from here. And it's false evidence. And once you just have a moment and think about the true evidence, you can help yourself. 70% of people actually report that they deal with this. So the best thing you can do with it is make it conscious. So what is imposter syndrome? You can read that. You feel like you're getting away with something, and then any moment now somebody's going to discover you as a fake. You're going, okay.
It's never happened to me before.
Right?
I resemble that.
And so someone's going to discover, and so there's this sense of shame that goes with it as well. But it really is that's part of it. So what happens is your brain generates this in order to keep you safe, which is really a false belief that you're special, but you're not special enough. So it keeps you comfortable. And if you think about an entrepreneur's life, it is anything but comfortable. It's risky. It's very risky. So this will want to keep you out of those behaviors you need in order to jump over that edge. Keeps you safe and in inaction. And the key here for imposter syndrome is inaction. So it keeps you comfortable so there's no progression. The one thing that keeps you moving is action. So whenever any of you, any of us, any of the people I work with go into this mode, the first thing I do is get them into action. What one action can you take, and whenever this shows up this week, what is the one thing you'll commit to that you'll immediately do? And you get them into some kind of action, and eventually that action breeds another action, and eventually they've forgotten all about it. So it's a reframing. It doesn't, because it's not going to go away, but it's going to put it in its perspective. And action is, as far as I've found, one of the best things to do to keep you moving. So this is the difference between feeling versus action. You're going to have feelings, you're going to have thoughts, but you can't see thoughts. Thoughts only come out, and you can really see them when they're in action. So thoughts are useful, but you get to choose which ones you act on. So the ones that aren't serving what you're up to, you can reframe, you can thank very much for coming, see you later, and you can take an action that's going to make a difference. Does that make sense? So often, here's the piece about it. It makes you feel like a liar because it's like you feel like you're keeping your shortcomings secret. And the feeling of feeling like you're not being authentic or being a liar is the thing that actually makes this so draws people to it if it's really icky feeling. Does that sound right to you guys? You guys get it? The secrecy part of it is what gives it power. We're gonna talk about power when we talk about founder syndrome as well. But the secrecy part of it, like, ooh, if I just don't let anybody know, but then it feels really scritchy, like there's something between you and other people, and that's what gives it power. Okay. All right, how to overcome it? Take action. Look at the evidence. Now, this is super helpful for any of you guys that work with entrepreneurs. Super helpful. Fake it till you make it. It's like an old adage, and I don't say to do that with everything, but with this particular thing I do, because there are things you have to do in order to build money, in order to build your company, and you just have to go do them. And sometimes you just have to go do them. There's no other. Stay humble. Surround yourself with mentors who uplift you and challenge you. So if you have someone that you can call who gets you, so I get, texts and calls all the time, and if somebody's really into, like, I have this one guy that is right down to his last round and needs to build that money, I'm like, text me whenever you have a successful meeting. Because then I get to he knows he can be accountable to me, and if something's really fallen down, really get me. But just let me know. It's really helpful because people who've been through it before can really help keep people in action. Don't hold back. So, focus on providing value. So shifting focus from what you don't know to what you can contribute to someone else. It's a really big help. Authenticity is a hoax. Everybody uses the word of being like they really, really want to be authentic. You're shaking your head. Do you have an example that you're thinking of?
No, but I see it and read it everywhere.
It's everywhere, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. So then when you're doing this thing called imposter syndrome, you feel worse because you keep seeing this thing called, I'm supposed to be authentic.
Yes.
But sometimes, to be really honest with you, it's not going to help you if you're out raising money and you're telling everyone how scared you are. That's not really going to instill confidence. So, that's where the fake it till you make it. That's where having those mentors where you can be true about how you're really feeling, right? And then, so here's just a little summary. Remember, false evidence appearing real. That's all that imposter syndrome is. Realize reality. This is the one thing I'm always reminding people of. Look, you've done a whole lot to get here. You've gotten here, and you've chosen to put yourself in the situation of the context called, I want to grow a company, and I want to start something. And there's going to be pain involved. So realize the reality that, then choose someone to confide in. You have to have your support team, your board. You have different people that you rely on for different things. I have people I rely on for dollars. I have people I rely on for emotional support. I have people I rely on who've done it before. Have all your people. Turn it around and see the gift in your imposter syndrome. You guys see where some of the gifts would be of just knowing that you have this? Any ideas?
Humility.
Pardon?
Humility.
Also gets you in action. Fear is an amazing motivator. It's not always where you want to come from. It'd be great if we all could come from abundance, but when you're starting a new company, that's not generally right. It's a really good motivator. It gets you to do things out of your comfort zone. Set goals and expectations you know you can achieve. So for the gentleman I was talking to this morning, he needs to have 10 amazing meetings a week. That's part of the metrics that he's doing. So he had 5 last week. Like, how many have in this week? He gets that even he had 5 really great ones. So he's really building on that. So he's trying to set the goals and expectations that will make sense for him. All right. Any questions on that? I just wanted to do a really quick. Does that help everybody? Yeah.
I just wanted to make a point, is that because every one of us has an imposter syndrome, and if you're raising money, the angel investors also have an imposter syndrome.
That's right.
And their imposter syndrome is arguably stronger than yours, because they're actually gonna lose their money
Their money.
betting on somebody like you. And so understanding that they have an imposter syndrome too, and alleviating it in a different way, and helping them alleviate it when it comes to you, actually does even more, in my experience, than just trying to just take care of oneself. And this idea of figuring out what they need to feel more secure, and what evidence are they seeing that is false hearing, and be very explicit about it. So I think it's absolutely critical to do that.
That's really great.
So, yeah.
So advocating like what I call over communicating, which might feel over communicating from the founder's place or whatever, but for the people that have their money in it, the more they hear on a more frequent basis, the less they worry about it. People will make up stuff in an absence of information. They'll make
Yeah.
up stuff that's way worse than it is.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean, but even before they invest, that there is a way to, just understanding that they have this fear and addressing that fear, sometimes explicit, sometimes not. The idea is, that every investor has burned themselves on one thing and another, and what they really want to know is not whether or not your product works or not, but whether or not you can be one of those really bad stories, or whether you can be actually proud and share that, hey, when I was the one, nobody else saw it, but it was called Amazon, and I was there, right? And the idea is that's what they want to see, and obviously you've got to deliver eventually, I got to deliver, but this idea is really important. And the other thing that you said that was really powerful is the mentorship.
Yeah.
And I find that it's actually, to me, is more important than anything else, because I will fall down, and so who will pick me up?
That's right.
Not who will push me down even further.
That's right.
And those are hard to find.
Well, and that's where that word authenticity comes in, is there are actually in your world, if you really think about it, spending the time with there may be five people in your life, maybe even three, that you can genuinely be authentic about your fears, your anxieties, what's up for you, what you're excited about. And really, you don't need any more than that. The whole world doesn't need to know everything about you all the time, right? Like, it's really appropriate to have your core people to be authentic with. And you want the ones, whenever I have anybody in a really rough spot, the one thing I have them evaluate is who is your support system? And then we evaluate, are they truly good for you? And if they're not, have them take a break for a while.
So I have a question for my investors and the ones, so for instance, consumer goods.
Okay.
I have imposter syndrome and fear around consumer goods and investing in companies that have consumer goods.
Okay.
Because they're very capital intensive. There's a lot of, capital costs that go into that.
Yeah.
The chances of exit is highly competitive. There's very low barriers to entry. Chances of exit are low.
Yeah.
And the multiples on it usually aren't great. So,
I don't know if that's imposter syndrome, that sounds like you used good
Yes,
faith.
it is.
well, it's I've lost money, but if I'm looking and this, a company makes it through, so not many consumer goods make it through our process,
Yeah.
but there are a few that have, and it usually involves the team.
Yeah.
And we really like the team and what they're doing, and
Yeah.
that's why they get moved through the process.
Yeah.
So, if, we're looking at raising, if we're looking at, funding some of these companies, how do I work not only with myself, but maybe my investors to help them understand if there's something that is false evidence that they're taking on as a reality?
Well, already, it's knowing you have a bias against,
So that's
based on
yeah.
previous experience.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. You've had previous experience that your being says, beware of this thing right now. The thing is it the same thing that you were bit by before? See, that's the thing, you want to do your research. So, I don't know, you had a pretty compelling list of data, right? So for you, I don't know if that's you know, you just wanna make sure you're evaluating each thing correctly, knowing you have a bias.
Yeah, so it's just more the self-awareness of the
Yeah.
bias that exists, even
Yeah.
though I may like the team, because,
Yeah, so you may have to do deeper due diligence on consumer products for you,
got it.
and have other people do it with you.
Yeah.
So it's not just you.
It's not just me, because there's the ones that I.
You have FOMO with Momotaro?
Yeah, no, no. Well, the
You're a
thing is
visionary.
I don't like to relate current situations
What's
to
that?
past, because it involves a different timing, a different place, a different people, different situation, and so I can learn from the past, but really saying that this current situation is going to be something that happened before is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Because there's different people involved, it's a different time, it's all different, even though it might look the same.
And saying that out loud consciously to the consumer product you're evaluating, just say, I'm just gonna let you know, here's my past experience, and
Yeah,
here's where I'm coming from, but at least then they'll know you have this little bit of past that's coming into your present.
yeah.
I don't think it's all bad though, I mean, it's kind of called learning.
Yes,
So it's
Okay.
iterative, right, and you've just learned over time that that may just be a space that is not comfortable.
okay,
Depends on risk capacity too.
yes.
Did that answer that?
It did,
Yeah, just talk like you did, and it's all good.
okay,
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah. Okay, so we can bounce around, if you guys come up with a thought later about that and you wanna ask it, go for it. This is not linear here. So founder syndrome. I work with this a lot. Shaking your head, yeah, I work with this a lot. And I work with it, also I do some work with some nonprofit boards, and I coach boards and work with executive teams. I see this a lot. And so that's why I'm bringing it here today. I really do think this is important for you guys to know what to look for, because I see it. So this is the difficulty faced by organizations where one or more founders maintain disproportionate power and influence following the effective initial establishment of the project. So after they have money, they're founded their company, they're going, right? Leading to a wide range of problems for the organization. What that basically means is you've got the founder or founders who have a dream. The dream is created, it becomes real, becomes a company. And then the power of their role. See, this is the thing that that founders and CEOs, people in power, don't understand their word and the weight of their word, the weight of their actions. They create a wake wherever they go. So I'm the CEO of my company. If I say boo, my boo means a lot more than someone else's boo, just from the fact of my rank. And even if you have organizations that are, flat, there's no such thing actually. I mean, that's kind of a fallacy in a way. You can play with that, but someone is going to have more power. And usually the people that created it, hold the money, or really hold the rank, are the ones that are going to have more power. So being careful with your word and being careful with your actions is really a responsibility. So, but founder syndrome is where it's very much a problem with smaller organizations. Some of the under 100, I mean, it can be any size organization, but I find it like under 100 people. I really see this, because it's personality run. And the personality gets in the way of the real business decisions and choices. So this is where the maturity, when you're going from the model of, from startup into a mature organization, there's a shift. So they need to evolve from seat of the pants growth, which you can do when you're smaller. You can be more agile that way, to well-planned and managed development. It's interesting, a lot of the biases I've heard of, with the smaller companies that I've worked with over the years, is they really have it's almost like in order to be for startup, you have to be against the man. Like it's an attitude, right? Which is just so ridiculous. Sorry, there's my bias coming out. But I mean, you don't have to have an either or binary relationship to it. So it's not, in order to be this thing, I have to not be that thing. Actually, a balanced approach is being a little bit of both. Like, there's lots to learn from these large organizations. You're actually jealous because they grew up and they actually are successful, you know? So I've seen organizations that really do try to be flat, and it really doesn't work so well because someone has to make choices and decisions along the way. So that partially keeps them from doing this. So, it's not me, yay. So the change requires the founder to change their leadership from that of a highly reactive, and reactive is a key word here, reactivity, individualistic style to a more proactive, consensus-oriented style. Okay? So instead of constantly reacting to what's coming up and being in fire mode all the time, to more of a proactive. This can be really difficult. Really difficult. Because the sheer power and drive often of entrepreneurs is their personality that drives them. It's their character type that drives them. And then to shift that drive into becoming more of a listener, more of a collaborator with your executive team, more of listening to your people who are creating your product, listening to your market even. So in order to drive often a new business, you push past what your competitive advantages, you look towards, you know, something that you see in the future. That's a different skill when you're running a mature organization. So how do you go from one to the other? To go from driving to more collaborative. It's possible, but it's difficult. So here's the thing to get. Organizations and founders that can't adapt often will experience the same problems repeatedly. So that's one thing you can take a note of, is if you see this cyclical thing always happening, you're like, this is interesting. Different employees, same situation. What's going on? Or why are our finances always like this? Or why is it always this late at this point? It seems to be a pattern. Notice a pattern, and that's when you're going to start to question what's going on. Good so far? Yeah? Okay. All right. So some troublesome traits. Sound familiar? Skeptical about planning, policies, and procedures. Remember that we don't want to be the man. So you say structure, that's not what got them there, they don't think. So that's what they don't want to do. Because they, number one, a lot of them don't know how, so they need help. That's where the mentorship comes in, training, you know, a coach, you know, whatever it takes someone to help them with that. Hiring someone else in on the team that's better at that. But just using planning policies and procedures, and you just automatically will get, well, that's not what got me here. Or I don't know how to do that. Remember that imposter syndrome? They don't know how to do it. They don't want to share that they don't know how to do it. They're scared of it. Okay. They make reactive decisions with little input from others. So often you'll see this will look like this, and you'll see it's very, very interesting to watch. I'm inside of a lot of organizations, and you'll see certain organizations I'm in, when the CEO is on vacation, everything's relaxed. People are getting their work done. They're working. They're totally working. They're actually more productive. CEO comes back in, all of a sudden, nobody knows what the priorities are. They're always getting skewed every other day. They're coming in, they're changing, you know, the product plan, they're complete. And then I'm working with the result of that with people, which is, oh my God, everything's on fire every 5 minutes. It really messes up the team. So, and it's always reactive to something, but you can't figure out what it's reactive to. What happened? They just came back from vacation. They're out of control. They don't know what's going on, so they're going to mix it up. Okay? So does this all sound familiar to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they often will handpick. Now, remember, this is not like people are out there founders don't do this because they're messing with people. They might seem like they're messing with people, they just don't know any other way to do it often. You see? So have compassion, because look, I've made some of these mistakes myself. So compassion for them, they're doing the best they can. But they often will handpick board members and staff, often friends and colleagues, who will align with their way of doing things, versus someone who will be adversarial to them on a board or adversarial to them in a role, which is not helpful. They're motivated by fear and guilt. So remember that imposter syndrome? That's part of the drive that gets them to get all that money and to get all the help and to get the business really going, often will come from a place of fear and guilt.
Catholic Church,
Yeah,
2,000 years,
yeah.
Fear
It
and
can
guilt.
work, yeah.
it works.
Lots of different religions.
That's what's interesting about this, I think, is just the whole founder syndrome. It's like it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean,
Because they're successful when they do it.
well, I mean, I look at founders like Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, right? That guy is runs a flat organization. He's one of the biggest chip manufacturers in the world. He's completely micromanages everybody. Whole initiatives can be changed on a whim, because he came back from vacation. But, for 2 years solid, he was the darling of the S&P, the highest performing company in the world on earnings and everything, So it's Zuckerberg's another example, right?
Steve Jobs.
Yeah, Steve Jobs. I mean, you got these examples, so it's a double-edged sword in the fact that most people that are like that build terrible companies that don't work, and then there's one out of 100 that does work,
Right,
and then they go to the moon.
right, that's right. I'm reading the Steve Jobs autobiography right now, and I'm like, wow. But if you really look,
That guy got fired from his own company by a guy he hired.
hired. Yeah, Jim
And
Spelling, yeah.
then the whole company was going bankrupt until his number one competitor, Microsoft, bailed him out, and he got back in the job seat.
That's right.
And if you're thinking about it, that, one could argue that Steve Jobs had the biggest founder syndrome, and the other.
Oh, totally.
Right, but his president didn't. President was all about planning, policy, and procedures, and that's what screwed up the
Almost
company.
killed the company.
So it's not. I don't think it's a straight up. I think it's
That's right.
it's a sword that can cut both ways. And my question that I have about this is, at what point? That's the next slide. At what point do you want to convert that way?
That's right.
Right? Because I'm never going to be I'm terminal founder syndrome. I'm not fixing it. But the idea is, but the company needs it, right? So the idea is at what point do you bring it in?
Yeah.
And is it a conversion into that, or can you find a balance, and how would you find that kind of balance in terms of qualities? How do you, because I know that for me, I can be super not that way, but then when I'm processing procedure, I'm processing procedure all the way, and sometimes that can be detrimental if it's too much. So is it a full conversion, or is it a balance, and how do you find that?
Yeah, you know what, there's so many ways to solve this. It's incredible, I've seen it solved a million times in different ways. So yes, it can be solved. And yes, you're right, you don't always want to solve all of it. So, depending on the company, depending on the role, depending on the person, is how you solve it. You may put other team members in, you may have certain things that happen. Steve Jobs, brilliance, and sometimes brilliance comes this other stuff. But John Scully, just to answer that question he had his own things. So the two of them together created something that was really weird. So I just want you to get this is like a generalized, so that you guys are keyed into, if you see this, then you'll be able, at least kind of some flag will go up. You have a really difficult time letting go. I get that. My name's on my company. I get it. It's really hard. Did you experience that? Did you?
We were really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were.
No, I got better than
Our
that.
reason we retired. It's
Yeah.
we're not moving past that. We're
Yeah,
just
right?
Well, maybe
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah. But moving on was maybe the right thing to do, right? Yeah. here's the key. They don't have a succession plan because they can't envision themselves not in it. So I'm working with a board right now where that's the problem, and we're building the succession plan, and ED is not liking it. I'm not his friend right now. Suffers HIPPO, we call it, highest paid person's opinion, which means that the person in charge is the one whose opinion you're gonna act on. Becomes paranoid as the delegation is required. That's not pretty to watch. Founder simmer, it sets in because the org becomes dependent on the unique style of the leader. So all the systems and processes are set up to support what he or she has created. So they purposely set it up, remember, they hire people who are their buddies who have the same thing, they're, they can often manipulate the board members or report out just enough in a way that, you may not see all of it. There's just different ways.
This is my last couple of years.
What's that, you what?
This is like my last couple of years of my last country.
Really?
It's great, yeah. I've
Yeah.
been seeing all of this together, it just really just paints a very clear image.
Yeah. And there are other pieces, these are the main ones, but these are the ones that when you do see it in a list like this, but the thing is you can miss it. It can be little bits and drips, and after a while, people get used to, well, this is just how the system is run. But they don't see, because you can't stand outside it if you're in it to see it. That's why often if you're a consultant, or if you're an investor, or if you're, coach like I am, you go in and you're like, whoa, this system, I'm outside the system, this system looks odd. So that's why you guys having that view, being able to look at it and go, I see about 4 things happening inside this company, we might want to take a look. What do we need to do? So here are the things you're looking for in a well-developed leader that you want to look for. And you want to be able to help your founders move into this, more of this kind of role. They appreciate plans and budgets as guidelines. So they get that, it's a business, it's supposed to make money, it's supposed to do that, and budgets are helpful, they see them as helpful. And the key word there is guideline. Using words like guideline, framework, open framework, guideline, using words that are less, set in stone. Often your entrepreneurs won't like that. They won't like being mandated to. But if you can give them something, this is a support tool for you, then that language will often help. They make proactive decisions. So as your business goes from entrepreneurial to mature, you're going to be looking more future. Often it is reactive when you're first starting your businesses and when you're really in that capital intense space. You do feel more reactive, but the company needs to start training everybody to start looking more proactively, even if it's a quarter or 2 ahead. They make staffing decisions based on responsibilities. So this is what a well-developed leader looks like. And there are many entrepreneurs that look like this. Many of them. They value board and staff members for their expertise. So they're able to understand that they don't have the whole package. They need others to contribute. They sustain strong credibility among customers. So instead of the company being focused on them and everything about their personality, it's really focused outwardly, externally, toward whoever their customers or whoever they're supporting is, the buyers. Okay, so the basic principle. Any questions so far? Any comments, or is this kind of all ringing true? Yes.
I want to make the point that I think that, the founders aren't doing that, aren't being that person because they're people.
Of course not. No.
And I think it's a combination of the imposter syndrome.
That's why I did it, yeah.
You as a founder or the top leader, a lot of times I never knew how much my words were being elevated. I'm the imposter, so I don't really think I'm that smart anyway. And then I say something and they all think it's God. It's like, That wasn't exactly how that was supposed to play out.
Uh-huh. It's a fine line, isn't it, between being humble and being in charge. They want you to be in charge. Then there's a balance between sometimes you gotta be humble.
Well, and they want you to be in charge, so then you be in charge.
And then they don't want you to be in
But
charge.
then you're being that founder that isn't letting go. So I think, I think it
It's hard.
escalates without anybody noticing it's escalating until it becomes a problem.
That's where key investors, board
Right.
members, really sharp people around. I mean, I'm a big advocate, and probably this is because this is what I do for a living. I am a big advocate for every leader, like a CEO, ED leader, should have a coach, an outside coach, because they're able to then not be alone. It's really difficult to be a leader by yourself. You don't have anybody that you can really trust that's not inside the system, that doesn't have an agenda of some sort.
And be willing to listen. That, I mean, I think that's what I look for in founders now, is, you know, are they willing to listen? Do they take feedback? Do they make changes based on that feedback, or do they just nod and smile?
And then go do whatever.
Yeah,
So that's a key. If they're not coachable,
right.
if you offer them a coach and they don't take you up on it, that's a very interesting thing that I play with people. I have one ED that I'm coaching the board, and then he wanted a separate coach for the ED. Maybe saw him once. So, I mean, he fits
Right.
all of this. So, you know, the board is now having to pretty well move him out because he's not coachable. It never has been. That's the problem. So, but as a investor, as a board, you gotta be really careful that you don't fall in and get kind of lulled into. Because a lot of times, some founders, the sheer will of their personality will be so engaging and so good. I mean, that's how they get people to give them money. That's how they get, you know. So you gotta really be strong to watch for the ones that are really. can
Well, and at
love
the
you.
angel stage, for the most part, you need that, because they're tiny
That's right.
organizations. Yeah.
So it's tricky.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I'm saying,
yeah.
it's like it's like, yeah, it's tricky. So here's, to your point. You see that? Understand that the recurring problems are not their fault. They don't come out intentionally to do this. You know, when I started my business 20 years ago, I was not very good at it. I made every mistake you can make, and wow, I look back on it and I'm like, wow. So, you know, and I didn't have that intention. So, they're willing to ask for and accept help. That's that coachability. And you can have them be coached by a mentor, you know, hook them up with someone that's good at whatever they need. Communicate often and honestly. Again, the over-communication piece, you can use that just in every part of your life. Whenever there's an empty void, someone will make something up that's worse than what's going to happen. So if you communicate often and honestly, and if your leaders do that, then you're good to go. Just like you said. They engage in stress management, especially forms not related to their jobs. So often with a good leader, I'll really ask them about, you know, what do you do for yourself? What do you do to keep yourself well? You know, it's so interesting because wellness has become like such a thing, you know, but even before wellness was a thing, there has to be some kind of outlet for leaders to be able to, because it is a really tough job. They're patient with themselves, their boards, and their staff. So the impatience of an entrepreneur is required at times, right? And the patience is also required. So are they able to balance between the two? Regularly take time to reflect and learn. This is the one key that we learned in a lot of the studies of very successful CEOs. And their boards, is that they reflect and they're able to take information in and then see how it affects them. That may sound really odd for me to make that distinction, but if you think about it, they're like, something occurred, this is what happened, I took it in and I learned from it. That may seem obvious to all of you, that that's like what people do, but some people don't do that. So it may, I know, right? They don't.
No, I mean, you know, I had a founder where, you know, we'd have like a retreat or an offsite, and I'd get all excited, thinking, oh, this is great, we're gonna have this time to reflect on where we're at, learn from it, move forward with a new strategy, and instead it was more like, you know, like a, I don't know, some kind of crazy, you know, pep rally, saying the same message over and over again, no reflection, no learning, you know, and I was like, what are we doing here? Might as well be back at the office working. Since we're not getting anything done here, and there's no reflecting and learning going on.
Isn't that something? Yeah. The distinction between a really great CEO, and I think I talk about him in an upcoming slide. The distinction is that the really great CEOs are the ones that throughout their life have been creating meaning for themselves. So we make up meaning, by the way. Meaning doesn't exist, we make it up. So we put meaning. This is a white piece of paper, I can make that mean anything I want. I mean, that's what we do. So if you've got a CEO that, if you sit and you interview them and you ask them, so tell me about yourself and tell me about your life. What is the one thing that really affected you greatly in your life? And they'll go, well, you know, I just kind of did this and then I did that, and well, now I run this company, and you know, and they don't, there isn't a conversation called, wow, I did this thing and I messed up, and here's what I learned from that. Like some kind of flavor of that. Are they taking the information in and actually growing from the iterative learning? Like we all learn from failure, we all learn from doing things not well, and we learn things from doing them well too. But it's the ability to be insightful and then take that on as their own and learn, and not make it deflecting out to someone else, blaming someone else, or just saying, well, that's how life was. So the acceptance of just that's how life was, you have some of that. You have to be insightful and then turning it out into some way that they learn something. That's one key when I interview CEOs, or people that are aspiring to that kind of role. I'm really listening for how their life went and their natural way of speaking about their life and what they learned. Make sense? So if you just get that today, and you start talking to people that you're investing in, you just watch. That's gonna be a successful leader.
So you're saying if someone doesn't specifically say, I did this and I did this and this was kind of rough and I learned this from it, then that's a red flag?
Some people naturally won't have a style where they'll talk like that, they may not. But if you can intuit a sense that there's a little bit of humbleness around, they're willing to talk about what didn't work, or they're willing to talk about, they may be more fact-related people, data-driven people, so they may not talk a lot about their feelings or their insights in that way. But if they talk about, well, you know, I grew up, let me make this up, I grew up, you know, pretty poor and in the Appalachian Mountains, and we didn't have a lot of money, and this is how it went, and you know, and I really chose that I was gonna do something different around it. Something like that. Hardship turned into something else. You know, you may have to play with asking more layered questions into some things that you get. If you get a lot of data, there's probably a lot of insight in there, you just gotta go pull it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do you just ask that question directly though?
Like what? Like,
It's an annoying interview question, but tell me about a challenge and how you responded to it. You know, something along those lines, or is that just too?
I don't know, I don't like questions like that, but that's just me.
Yeah.
You know, for people who don't interview very often, that would be a natural question.
Yeah.
But for those of us who interview a lot and work with people a lot, I would tend to say things like, you know, I am just so curious about how you got where you are. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got where you are? And then the key is to listen for where they start, because they're gonna start at a place that's a natural starting point for them that was impactful. And then where do they go with it? What do they tell you? And then just be in a conversation with them.
So there's a lot of power in what Anne Marie just said with the word curiosity. I use that all the time. I use it with my team all the time. Run it into their brains to always be curious. And so people usually don't get offended when you're curious about something. They won't take it wrong as like a personal attack or get defensive in any way. So it's like, oh, I'm curious about that. and it helps you to dig in a little bit more.
Without
When-
saying, God, it sure seems like you're an idiot, can you explain it yourself?
Hey, George, what's up? Yeah.
Same question basically, but it's
Be
phrased
curious,
in
be
a
kind, and you will
different
always win.
attitude.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so, but that word curious, I use a lot when I'm talking to entrepreneurs and I don't understand actually what they're saying or how they're talking about things, so just something.
And if you want an alternate word, that's exactly right. That's a very coachy thing to do. And another word you can use is, gosh, I wonder about that. You can use the word wonder.
Intrigued.
I'm intrigued by that. Good one. Anything that's not
Because you don't want to build up walls,
confrontational.
yeah, with
Right.
individuals, you're trying to break down walls to actually get to a
Right.
there about what's
Because
going
they're trying to
on.
put their best foot forward, they're not gonna come in with all their failures.
But a lot of what I coach our entrepreneurs to do anyways is to be upfront about where they're at, because we know that these deals aren't fully baked. We actually know that there's things and challenges and obstacles that they have, that's why they're early stage companies.
Right.
And so just to be really upfront and honest, because there's a lot of resources and help available to that. So not trying to be the shiny penny is important. So that's what
I have something to say. This is the situation I'm in. I'm an entrepreneur. Do I need to build a team when there's already a team in place already? Power Brands is telling me that you don't need to build a team because we are the team. But then I'm by myself. So do I build a skeleton crew? Because they have everything from the label to the accounting. So what I do when they process my beverage, do I build a skeleton crew by myself? Or do I raise the money to pay Power Brands to go through manufacturing all the way down to the accounting? Because they have the entire team built out already.
That sounds like an operational question that I'd have to dig in more with you. That is an operational question. That's less, I think, about leadership and more about operational.
So do
Unless I'm
I?
not
It's also about what the
But-
core of your business is, right?
Yeah.
If
It's
the
a
core-
beverage, it's a tea beverage that I'm trying to put out to market.
Okay.
Power Brands have the team already built out.
So what's the real question you're asking?
So what do I do? Do I build a skeleton crew
Why
and
would you
waste
do
the
that?
money for, like, for example, if an investor is interested, do I build a skeleton crew additional to Power Brands? Or do I just let Power Brands take care of it?
What would a skeleton do for you that you don't already have?
Manufacturing, I can't manufacture the product.
So the skeleton crew's gonna do that or no?
You'd outsource
Uh,
that.
No, the skeleton crew won't do it. It'll be,
I think there's another question you're actually asking.
well, it'll come back to you
Yeah,
later.
yeah, but I mean, like, sit with it, but I think there's another question you're actually asking, there's something else there. It's not really.
So am I separate? Like, since I'm by myself, do I build a skeleton crew separate from the crew that's already built?
Yeah, but what would that do for you? What do you want a skeleton crew to do?
Yeah, is that gonna cut your costs, you're not gonna pay Power Brands as much? Or is it gonna add to the value or understanding of the
It's
product
already-
internally? I mean, I always say it's like, keep the core, right? And what you don't do well, outsource it and get
Outsource.
people to help you. Or if there's people that are just better set up and can do that faster and get you to market quicker, that's good, leverage that, but you wanna build the core of your business. I see founders sometimes that aren't technical, they have a technical idea and they want to build this product and they want to outsource the development, fine, but you still need a technical co-founder or somebody who's like your teammate, a team.
A co-founder, that's what I'm looking for.
Yes.
That's the underlying
Co-founder.
question.
Right on, okay.
It sounds to me like you need some co-founder partner in crime,
Yeah,
and
that's what
then
I
leverage Power Brands for everything else. I mean, building a skeleton crew for production or stuff like that when people have already got it figured
It's a-
out, doesn't seem like it's gonna save you any money or time.
Right on, okay.
What it sounded like to me is there was some question you were answering around. Lonnie?
I get slipped my mind, I gotta go back to it.
But I think you're right on. I think you're right. It's around having someone else to be with you in this journey in a way.
Instead of being by myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's super lonely.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and that in itself is stressful. Am I doing the right thing? There's no one to bounce things off.
Yeah.
So creating a support team, creating mentors, and maybe there is someone else you need to.
So when I do present it to investors, I say, these are my mentors, what do I say, you know, when they ask me, where's your team? Do I say Power Brands is a team? Do I say I'm by myself, I'm trying to create a small team, or what do I do?
That's a messaging question. That would take longer to solve, yeah. Those are great questions. They're really great questions.
Good.
Yeah, no, I think they're great questions for you to have, and then go about solving them for yourself. And asking people who've done it before that have a similar model. Is that all right? Awesome. Great. All right, we're gonna keep going. All right, so if you have a board, these are just, I just wanna go through these pretty quick, because I don't wanna miss the other. These are some of the things that boards can do in order to, if you have this issue going on, to be able to actually take care of it. It's a bit tricky when you're a board member, but when you're investors, it's a little bit easier. You can ask a lot of these questions. Any of us have any questions? Don't be part of the problem in the founder syndrome. Okay?
So I guess, you know, for us, one things that we need to assess when we're looking at these companies is who's on the board and if they're actually going to be helpful, if they're going to actually benefit the investor's best interest, because that's the difference between an advisory board and a fiduciary board, is they have our interests at heart. So keeping that in mind, and that the strategy that they're coming up with is going to bring the best benefit to the investors.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges that we have faced recently is, you know, we have a lot of companies that are primed to exit, and they're not.
Oh.
So they just keep going. And so for us, we want liquidity.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
companies are ripe for the taking, and the market's never gonna be any higher than it is right now. So,
So what is it they're scared of?
you know, these are all very good questions, and I'm not on the board, so, and
Yeah.
boards can't talk about what they say. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so they
That's
have,
interesting.
so but it's one of the challenges that we have, so it's really understanding, you know, who's on the board and how they're going to, you know, and I think talking to board members, about their investment in the company and what their role is on the board and how they're going to have our backs is really important through the due diligence process.
That's right. Yeah, and how you interview them and talk with them and figure out their character. So you want to understand how they support and relate to founders. What's up with that? Let's just keep, these are some other things that you can do. I just don't want to spend too much time on it. So this is just other things to keep in mind. So then, here's founders. For founders that are having this issue, here's some things that you can do. If you have a founder that's having some issues, accept a mentor and advocate within. So some form of mentor. It doesn't have to be a coach, but it could be some form of mentor that they can relate to. Ensure a customer-driven organization. Set direction through planning, starting to introduce planning, forward-thinking budgeting, you know, being in the future. Organize resources to meet goals. Motivate leadership and staff to meet goals. They're gonna need help learning and development, learning how to do this. Guide resources to meet goals. So having goals is really exciting, like, you know, really having real goals, measurable goals. Think transition. They need to start thinking transition. Either they're gonna develop themselves and their team to be able to go to the mature organization, or they're not. But are they in, or they, you know, they need to start thinking about what's the transition, and then how do we address the gap in between. All right, so this is the step. Just we're gonna go through this really fast too, but the staff, it's a rough place for the staff sometimes when you've got founder syndrome going on. And you'll see it by high turnover, you'll see it by behaviors in meetings, you'll see it. These are some of the things, these are super clear. So for the staff, do they want to stay and help it recover or not? Try to help use the organization structure, so there's some more things. And I can see recovering or not, you need to be able to measure. Update your resume and you might want to be leaving, but don't burn bridges. So I like this summary. It may be that the founder's greatest gift is converting a dream to reality by inspiring others with the ability to keep the dream real. So when it starts actually, the dream is real, that's when it becomes operational, and that's when your leadership part really has to start kicking in. Okay, so now we're gonna go through, we have about another 18 minutes left. So is everybody good so far for another 18 minutes? Everybody's up? Okay. So we're gonna go through character, we're gonna go through this pretty quickly, but it's a lot of what we've already been talking about. I've been dripping and dropping it through here. So character, people have this notion that character is something you just kind of gets dropped into you somehow when you're little. And that, you know, I'm gonna make this up, but for some people they say, oh yeah, we went to church every Sunday and that really built my character, and just what I've heard, different things I've heard over the years. The whole concept of character, right? I sent my son to a private all-boys school because I wanted to build character. I remember saying that many years ago. So, and now I've done so much character science, I'm like, okay, that's pretty funny, but it actually worked. So, but do you know what I mean? But it's like, we know there's this thing called character, but we think it's just imbued in us in some way, given to us somehow. It's actually practiced, and it can be learned. So that's the cool thing. So if you're not sure if you have character or not when you're younger or growing, you can actually learn it. And we now know how to measure it. And we now know the results of measuring the character. We know what those measurements look like. And it's highly productive companies. And that's what's cool. So our viewer way to see, so it's our viewer way to see the world and influence our behavior. So it used to be there was no control how you turned out in a way. There's actually huge control how you turn out. So the new thought is character is intentional and chosen. So your unique combination of internalized beliefs and habits that motivates how you relate to others. Here's how you know what your character is. What are your behaviors? How are you with others? That's how we know how your character is. That's why it's key for leaders inside of organizations. Your character, you can talk about your beliefs all you want, but if your actions show up differently than those beliefs that you talk about, no. Your behaviors with others is really what your character is. And it's over time. So your character is based on habits or behaviors that occur over time. Right? So character, who you are, plus your skills, what you do, equals results. So that's your return on character. So your ROI, this is your ROC. So return on character. Okay, we're gonna go through this pretty quickly, so bear with me here. So there's the 4 principles, what they call moral principles of character. I just say 4 principles of character. Often you've heard your head as your fast brain. This is a little bit reversed, so bear with me on this one. Because your head actually does get data and information and pattern recognition pretty quickly, your brain, pretty quickly. And you think you're deciding, but your brain's actually already decided before you're conscious of it. It's really cool stuff. But you don't know that split second that your brain has already made the choice. So, we call this the head a bit of your slow brain and your heart more of the fast brain. So the choices come from heart rules head. Okay? I'm going really fast with that, so if that didn't make a lot of sense, you can ask me. So, generating trust, telling the truth, these are the behaviors that go with your head. Integrity generates trust. If you have integrity, integrity is the continual alignment of word and behavior. Continual alignment. Alignment means together, continual means it's always going in and out. So integrity is not a constant state that you always have. You don't have integrity and then you have it. Oh, it's gone. Oh, now it's gone again. So integrity is a constant choice. So you're continually choosing to be in alignment. So if you're in alignment and your word and your actions match over time, it generates trust. So as a leader, if you generate trust, what that looks like is telling the truth, acting consistently with principles, values, and beliefs, walking the talk, right? Standing up for what's right and keeping promises. If your leaders do that, that generates trust. So if they fall down one day in some way and they do something that isn't so effective, they've already built up that trust bank. People are going to be more apt to forgive them for that moment and go with them. Now, forgiveness, if you go over to the heart, which is more of a heart or emotional place to be, it generates innovation. Here's why. If a leader wants to generate innovation, they need to allow mistakes, right? So letting go of one's mistakes, so being able to make mistakes, is a key thing that I ask CEOs when I'm hiring them. So what do you think about people making mistakes? How do you handle them? And so then we have a conversation about mistakes. Mistakes are awesome. What you do with the mistakes is really important. Letting go and letting go of others' mistakes, focusing on what's right versus what's wrong. So if someone does make a mistake, allowing people to be able to bring it so that you can work it through, right? All right, so responsibility, this is another key principle of character. Responsibility creates inspiration. So when you own your choices, you own them, you're responsible for them, you admit your mistakes and failures, and you express concern for the common good. Creates inspiration on your team. Compassion drives up engagement. So if you want a team that's engaged, empathizing with others, empowering others, so you can see how this is different than the founder syndrome. See, this is like exactly the opposite. Actively caring for others and committing to others' development. And that actually drives up engagement. Now, this comes from, where this comes from is what's called character science. And many studies have studied CEOs, and the reason to take note of this is that over a long period of time that these studies were done, the CEOs sorted out based on performance of their companies. And there were key indicators of what they were measured on. And what sussed up at the end of the research are these key traits that made a difference in the organization. And again, it's 5x over what the other companies were able to produce because they paid attention to this. So why do we care? Companies make more money. So if you guys are looking to invest in companies that actually, you're interested in liquidity, that's what I just heard. So if you're interested in that, make more money. People are more engaged, lower turnover, you save recruiting costs. I mean, it's just enormous what occurs with that. All right. So high character CEOs have what's called an empathy habit. And what they can do to build character is practice empathizing. Empathizing really comes from deep listening. So being able to actually really truly listen to what's underneath and what's happening for that individual in front of them, or that group, it could be a team, right? That there's something off or missing. So being able to build that empathy habit versus being the one always talking. So the most powerful CEOs that I work with often don't say a whole lot. They do a lot of listening. The others first habit. So often, CEOs are really great CEOs take care of themselves in the background. They know what they need and they take care of themselves. But when they're appearing with their team or outward or whatever, they're always others first. So you move me first to others first. Again, think about the founder syndrome. It's really different to that. Admitting your mistakes habit. Being able, so that was the fine line, we were talking about, Karen, which is like being humble, being able to let them know you're human, but at the same point, they want someone in charge. It can be really tricky doing this in the right balance. So start owning your own mistakes and vulnerability. So again, how are you vulnerable, but also they can depend on you? It's a tricky balance. So the distinctions of a high character CEOs, here are the things that we found in research, is that all of the ones that were highly successful had mentors. They didn't just rely on themselves or people just like them. They had people that were different than them. They had a positive worldview. This was really interesting that came out of it. They actually had a really positive view of the world in general. When you spoke to them, they were fair. You might call it optimistic, but it was really global, like a worldview that the world is awesome, people are great. Yeah, this might be hard, but they always tended to be on the optimistic. What's that?
It's their attitude of abundance.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. They might have a bad day, but they pick themselves up the next day. They create meaning and are insightful about their life. Remember I mentioned that? That's a really big key. Like they can actually take things in personally and do something with it and something comes out of it. So what is leadership? So leadership is a way of being, not just behaviors and practices. They're outcomes of being in a state of leadership. So the results are the outcomes of that way of being. The second one is one of my favorite things that I use quite often. Leadership state is internally directed, people-focused, present, and supremely creative. So often, if I'm working with an entrepreneur that's making that shift from personality-driven entrepreneurial company where it really took all of their personality to drive that thing, now they need to shift in operational mode, more of a mature company. When they're making that shift, what I try to get them to see is the thread of their creativeness, their creativity that was needed to birth and dream up something is now needed over here to be creative and birth a team, birth a whole structure and system. And when you get that thread, if you're just using your creativity in a different way, that's all. They get it. So that's the thread, but that's the supremely creative. Leadership is supremely creative. Normal state is comfort-centered and in the past, right? So you're gonna be risk-averse if you're staying in comfort all the time. What do I want, which is comfort, versus what do I want to create, which is leadership. So that's a really key for interview questions when you're talking to your teams and looking for leaders. What do I want to create? They're always talking about like building, creating, getting better, improving, that kind of thing. And we teach and lead by our presence. So who are they with others? Okay, we're gonna go quickly through this. All of these are leadership, pieces of leadership. Insightful and practical, problem solving. So the distinction of a manager versus a leader, problem solving is a manager. How are we gonna solve that problem? Versus purpose finding, which is really a leader. What is it that we're actually like more mission driven, if you wanna use that language? So they have one foot in insight, we've been talk about insight, and 1 foot in the practical, because insights without actions, nothing happens. So there's the definition for integrity. Courage, these are other parts of leadership. Everyone wins, so courage, no one has to like us in the place of courage, but you stand for your own core. Presence, you don't act from your history, you act. Presence is really being actually right here, right now, with whoever you're with at that moment. So right use of power. Again, founder syndrome is really personality driven, based on ego, based on they're trying to get something from the situation to make themselves feel better. Right use of power, what are you in this for? Constantly tracking and asking yourself what you're doing, which is more purpose driven. Intuition, humor is excellent, wisdom, and authenticity, there's that word, don't we love that? But authenticity is saying what is so, which is more truth driven, versus always sharing about, here's how my authenticity isn't like I'm being open to everyone. For me, it's really about saying what's so for right now. And that's it. So that's what we do at Archer. We do this kind of stuff. And that's it. And this is when I do discussion groups around it. We break into groups and there are questions that go with those particular attributes. And then we work on those questions together as groups when we do a day long of this. We work on leadership and compassion, and then we practice those